Joshilyn Jacson, who is over there, is not only a wonderful writer, but she's a wonderfully good writer. That's why her books have been national bestsellers. That's why they've been nominated for awards. And that's why her novel, The Girl Who Stopped Swimming, has just been named to the Georgia Center for the Book's new list of 25 books that all Georgians should read. And she is getting her award tonight. You perhaps already know her as the author of two delightful novels, in addition to the one I mentioned, Gods in Alabama, which has my favorite all-time opening paragraph, and Between Georgia. Now, you may already know her from hearing her speak before, that she is one of the funniest, most dynamic authors around. No pressure, no pressure. You probably know that she lives in Atlanta, that she was born in Florida, that she grew up in a military family. She remembers that she lived in 7 different states before she reached the age of 9. She got degrees in literature, creative writing. She did some acting, she did some writing, and in 2005 she published her first novel, Gods in Alabama. Now her 4th novel has just been released, Backseat Saints. And like its predecessors, it's definitely got a sense of humor about it, but her readers are going to discover some places they haven't been before when they started. It's evidence that while Joshilyn still knows how to tell a terrific story, her creativity is expanding and her reach is growing. As Catherine Stockett, the author of The Help, puts it, this is raw, tangy, and funny, an enthralling peek into the secret sorority of mistreated women. We are so happy to welcome to the new Tucker Library the fabulous Joshilyn Jacson. And the water is just about to slide off.
Hey, y'all. Oh my, we're having water issues. I have to just take a minute and thank you so much for being here. It's nice to see so many people coming out to talk about books. You're a dying breed. And especially since you are supporting a couple of things that are very dear to my heart, namely the Georgia Center for the Book, library systems, and an independent bookstore. And honestly, these are the sorts of people that are the reason I have a career. I was definitely a word of mouth author. I was a hand-sold author. The independent bookstores essentially, not only did they start off my career, but they've helped it continue to grow and build. And even now that I have a readership, the next person whose book you want to read, who's just coming out with a debut, they need those indies. And so I can't thank you enough for supporting them. And it's sort of like a chain thing. Because of the indies, I have a job. And because of you, there are indies. So I kind of feel like we should hug. But so thank you for doing that. I appreciate it more than I can say. I'm here tonight to talk a little bit about Backseat Saints, which is my new novel. But I guess the only way to talk about it really is to talk about its main character, Rose Mae. My longtime editor, Karen Karmetz-Rudy, who's been my editor through all 4 of my books, agrees that this is really a departure for me because my books usually have what she calls a Broadway cast of thousands. And Backseat Saints is a one-woman show. It's about Rose Mae Lolly, and that she carries the whole thing through. It's a voice book. It's about this woman. And she is not a woman I liked when I first met her over 7 years ago, and she is not a person that I ever expected to write a book about. It was her idea, not mine, which is, I guess, my way for apologizing for the kind of language that girl uses. Rose Mae Lolly first showed up in my first novel, Gods in Alabama, as a minor character. And now, when I was, in order to talk about where Rose Mae came from, I'm going to have to talk about Gods in Alabama for a little bit. If you have not read Gods in Alabama, you absolutely can go to hell for that. It's in Leviticus. It's not true. If you haven't read Gods in Alabama, I'm going to give you just a little synopsis so that we're all on the same page. It's about a young woman named Arlene Fleet. When she goes off to college in Chicago, she lives in a small town in Alabama. She goes off to college in Chicago. She makes a deal with God. It's a pretty good deal for God. He gets 3 for 1. She says she's never going to tell another lie. She's going to stop fornicating with every boy she meets. And she'll never set foot back in the state of Alabama as long as God keeps the body of the man she killed hidden. So it's a pretty good deal. My mom insists at this point I always stop and say that book is not autobiographical. But Rose Mae Lolly I always knew she'd be in the book. I thought she would come in around chapter 8, and in my head, she was named Jim Beverly's high school girlfriend. She would have 3 sentences where we would establish that she existed. She was named Jim Beverly's high school girlfriend, and she had long dark hair, which was an important plot point. Jim Beverly is the guy that Arlene knows where he is, and God knows where he is. Nobody else knows where he is. You with me? So I was waiting for her to show up in chapter 8. So I get to chapter 8. I start writing my 3 sentences about Jim Beverly's high school girlfriend, and Rose Mae Lolly shows up. She shows up with a name. She shows up with a history. She shows up with an agenda, and she takes over the chapter. And everywhere she goes in that chapter, things explode, catch on fire, get ruined, fall into sinkholes, or die. This is fiction gold. I just loved that she was so in love with trouble, and trouble just loved her back. And so I thought, okay, this is wasted. So I stopped the book where I was, and I went back to chapter 1, and I took Rose Mae Lolly with me. And I had her show up in chapter 1 on Arlene's doorstep looking for Jim Beverly, like God's dirtiest messenger angel with, pugnacious hair, and her shoulders all set, demanding things. And just as she had later in the book, everywhere she went, trouble started. And that's what you want, right? Because that's what you want in a novel. So I started to get, and she's kind of a villain in that book. She's not a terribly sympathetic character. I wasn't that crazy about her as a human being, but I was interested in her, and I liked the way she worked in that book. So she sort of infested it a little bit. Even though I kind of got invested in her a little bit, I thought that when I finished Gods in Alabama, I was done with her because I don't write sequels. I don't do it. And here's why. It's an emotional thing. I feel like, if you've ever read any of my novels, you know I shoot people, I beat them to death with tequila bottles, I blow up whole small towns. If you're a character and you get all the way to the end of one of my novels and land in some place of hopeful peace, you deserve to be left alone. And you can't write a sequel about relatively happy people who have a nice chicken dinner and take the dog for a walk. It's a great life. It's a terrible novel. So I never want to go back in there and burn these people up again after whatever horrible thing I've done to them. I feel that. So Rose, I thought, was over. I'll tell you what kept her alive for me. It was y'all. I would go to events, bookstores, libraries, whatever, to talk about whatever my latest book was, Gods, then Between, then The Girl Who Stopped Swimming. As late as when I was talking about The Girl Who Stopped Swimming, I would still have people showing up and asking me questions about Rose. Now, I have a character flaw. I have more than one, but I'm just going to confess the one tonight. I have a character flaw, and it's this. There's a thing I don't like to say. If you ask me a question, I don't like to say, I don't know. I really like to know stuff, and I like to tell you. I love that. My personality type is teacher, if you take all the little personality tests. I love to know stuff, and I love to tell other people stuff. So, and I didn't realize how obnoxious a personality characteristic this was until I had 2 children who are exactly like that, who will look me in the eye and make up statistics about water buffalo mating practices in Wichita before they will say, I don't know, Mom. So I'm working on it. I'm trying not to say that I'm trying to say, I don't know. But if people would ask me questions about Rose Mae Lolly, who else would know? I made her up. I lie for a living. You say to me, did Rose Mae's mother die or did she leave? I go, she left. And I say it authoritatively because I made her up and I know. But what happened was I would answer these questions and I would listen to what I was saying and I would think, I think that's true. And it would get filed away. So as Gods kind of fell away into this closed story that I was finished telling, Rose Mae kept growing. And Rose Mae's history kept building. And she just kept evolving. And I learned more and more about her every year until one night, I was just about done with The Girl Who Stopped Swimming. I was actually in edits for it, and I had gone to a library event, and somebody had asked me another question about Rose Mae, and I was dreaming about her. I dreamed about her that night, and I woke up at like 3 in the morning, and I shook my husband. I was like, Scott, 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 Scott. Everything Rose Mae Lolly says in Gods in Alabama is a filthy lie, and I know why she's really looking for Jim Beverly. And Scott said, it's 3 a.m. And I was like, oh, you're right, I'm sorry. So I got out of bed, and he went back to sleep. And I sat down, and I started writing Rose Mae's story. And, you know, I don't like writing sequels, so I knew it wouldn't be a sequel. I knew it had to be her book. And it sort of runs concurrently with God's. They are thematically linked, and you can read them in either order. It doesn't matter, but it's not a story that picks up where one leaves off. It's a Rose Mae's book. I started writing this book, and that girl, the essential, trouble-loving girl, had not changed. She had grown, and I had learned more about her, and I had come to understand her, and I had come to love her. But she is what she is, and this book begins when she takes a friend to the airport. Who can get in trouble taking a friend to the airport? Rose Mae Lolly. She takes this friend to the airport, and that tells you something about their relationship right there, right? Because, I mean, maybe we don't want to admit it, but we have friends that we'll take to the airport, and then we have friends that we like and all, but I'm not taking you to the airport. You know what I mean? So this is her airport-worthy friend, and she's taking her to the airport, and she gets there, and at the airport, she discovers a gypsy. Now, this is not a chance meeting. This is somebody who's been following Rose for years, someone from Rose's past. And this is, you know, if somebody follows you for long enough, you'll catch them. This is the moment that Rose catches this woman following her. And the gypsy sits down with her and does a 3-card tarot read for her, past, present, future, that guides the whole structure of the novel. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience, I certainly have, where you know something, but you don't want to know it. So you put it over here, and you build a very wall, you build like a wall over here, and then you get very busy this way, certainly not looking over there, nothing of interest, nothing to see here, move along. And you just keep it over there walled up until somebody, your husband, your best friend, your mother, your lover, says to you this thing, and they say the words. And once the words have been said, there is nothing you can do to not know this truth anymore, because it rings out in you like gospel. And that's the experience Rose has with this gypsy. And what the gypsy says to her is, Rose, this beautiful, abusive man you married, this man you love, he is going to put you in the ground. Unless you put him in the ground first. So Rose gets her Poppy's old 45. When she heads out to Wildcat Bluff, to a trail her husband likes to run, and she lays for him there. And that's the first 8 pages. This girl is trouble. I thought that I would read a short scene from the first chapter. It's a flashback scene, which I like to read because it's just this one nice self-contained thing. And it's Rose meeting her husband, Tom Grandy, for the first time. And I thought I would read that, and then I thought that we would do question and answers. So you are forewarned. If there's something you want to ask, you know it's coming, so that I don't finish and go, so who has a question? And then we just look at each other for a while. I start to feel awkward and like I might need to go to the ladies' room, and you start to think maybe that question was dumb. Just get it front-loaded. I will appreciate it. This is so weird, but I read my own audiobooks, but I get really nervous reading in front of people. I don't know why. I mean, I love reading my own audiobooks. I love doing readings, but it's very different when you have an audience, so just bear with me for a second. This is so dumb. Now you don't exist. Rose Mae Lolly was wearing the mask, warm smile, light step of the fake girl she'd grown over herself. She'd worn that face over hers all the time, every waking minute for almost 2 years now, since the moment she figured she'd taken enough beatings for her long-gone mother and lit out from her daddy's house. She'd waitressed her way down the coast every few months, trading one small town with a bad job and a worse boyfriend for another, much the same. With no safe space, Rose kept her smiling shell on all the time, but some days it felt as thin as the candy pink cotton of her retro 50s waitress uniform. That uniform had a white Peter Pan collar and a miniature apron. It was cut to fit, and the skirt was short. And the first time Tom Grandy showed up on a double date, his girl didn't like that uniform one bit. The sign by the door said, "Seat yourself," so Tom did, sliding into one side of a four-top booth. His date followed, and the other couple sat down across. Rose was the only waitress on at this hour. She could tell by looking they were from the A&M Kingsville campus. She'd pegged them as sports boys, taking their dates for eggs after the victory party. And it had been a victory. Rose could smell it on the boys as she came around the counter bringing the coffee pot, a mix of pheromones and beer and fresh male sweat, the smell of win. They were both good-looking boys, but her eye went right to Tom. He was 6 feet tall with a meaty build that said football to her, and she liked the Roman nose. She also liked the way he eyed her as she swayed toward them. To the other couple, she was a vague pink waitress shape bringing menus. But Tom looked. Tom's date had a high ponytail that was beginning to unravel into fronds onto her pretty neck. She had a mound of bangs flat on the backside, teased into a rigid foam of curls that humped up over her forehead. This late, her breck was beginning to fail her, and that bang puff had started listing to starboard. When Tom spent too long looking at Rose's face before the inevitable stealthy eye slide down her body, Rose could feel that girl bristle up. Rose was only 21, but this girl looked young even to her, a freshman with a Glamour Shots fake ID. The girl narrowed her eyes, venomous, telling Rose plain that she wasn't used to chap-lipped watrons with no tan stealing her male gazes. She had no doubt been the prettiest girl in her high school, but Rose was willing to bet it had been a small school. "Good morning," Rose gave them her best 3 a.m. cheerful, passing out the menus. "Welcome to Duff's. I'm Rose. I'm going to be taking care of you this morning." They'd all flipped their mugs right side up, so Rose leaned across to pour coffee, first for the dark-haired boy, then for his date. "Morning," Tom said back. He was the only one who spoke to her. She turned to pour his coffee, and then, because he was looking at her face again, not her tits and not his date, looking at her like she was a person, she found herself saying, "So, what position do you play?" "Outfield," he said, "sometimes third base." She shook her head. "I asked what position you played, mister. I didn't ask what you did in spring to stay in shape." He grinned then, giving her an assessing nod like he was adding smart and sly to the pretty. "Strong side safety," he said. "Oh, fast boy." She started filling his date's cup. "What the hell are you doing?" his date demanded, her bangs a-tremble. Rose stopped and tipped the pot upright, her smile fading. "I'm sorry," she said. "Did I order coffee?" Bangs asked. Rose said, "I'm sorry, you turned your cup over." "Yeah, because I want hot cocoa." "Sure thing," Rose said. "I'll get that while y'all look over the menus." "What can I get for you today?" the girl said to her friend across the table. "What would you like to drink? Would you care for a beverage?" You'd think you'd get those lines on the first day of waitress school. Rose felt the fever of a blush rising in her cheeks, and she knew it was painfully visible on her pale skin. Dropping her eyelids, she focused on her feet so that none of them could see the furious deeps in her eyes. She held her hand very still to keep from pouring scalding coffee over that bang puff. She could practically smell the ashy scent the girl's hair products would release, could hear her surprised cry as the hot liquid seared her scalp. While the girl was screaming and clawing at her head, Rose would say calmly, "You turn your cup over in a diner, it means you want coffee," and then she'd call an ambulance. "I apologize," Rose said. Her voice was trembling with the effort it took to stay her hand. She picked up the cup with a small splash of black liquid in the bottom, made herself pivot, forced herself to walk away. Duff's was quiet. She heard her every footfall on the floor. There were the two obligatory old drunk guys silently nursing coffee at the counter, yellow-skinned because they had maybe half a working liver left between them. The couple in the back had cuddled up on the same side of the booth, whispering. Nobody was feeding the juke. She could hear Bangs saying something low and giggly. She caught the word Casper. Her blush traveled, flushing the backs of her pale, bare legs. The girl's friend was laughing with her now in a high-pitched trill that sounded to Rose like a mean pig squealing. Behind the counter, Rose dumped a packet of Swiss Miss with mini mallows into a clean mug. That girl, Bangs, she was wearing a sundress, crisp and green and new. She had a sheer white sweater thrown over her shoulders. It was a frivolous sweater, the kind a doting mother would buy along with new bedding and a tiny dorm refrigerator. Rose would bet her week's tips that that same mother kept Bang's girlhood room intact, just waiting for Christmas and spring break. And meanwhile, here was Rose, prettier and smarter and nicer in public, drifting motherless from town to town. Rose lived alone in a dank, rented room with kitchen privileges and no lock on her door. Even her landlady's damn cat, Boo, could open up Rose's door. He'd stand on the back of the couch and bang at the knob with his scabby paw. He was all over scabs. A flea allergy, her landlady said, but she never took him to the vet. He'd creep into Rose's room when she was sleeping, and he'd slide under her blankets to press against her side, desperate and moist. Rose couldn't stand to pet him, and she was allergic to cats, but she dry-swallowed Benadryl, and she let Boo press and press against her because she was that desperate right back. It should be me in that booth, Rose thought. College girl like Bangs, smart and busy and worthy, going places with a sharp-looking sports boy watching me. For half a minute, bantering about football, the smiling girl with the sass and the bouncy step hadn't been a skin. Rose had really been her, and it had felt like coming home to someplace new and clean. Bangs could have spared her that 30 seconds, because Bangs had all night. Hell, Bangs had all year and more years coming. Rose poured hot water and watched the cocoa foam to life. All Rose had was prettiness, a spoon, and the right to stir the cocoa of bitches until it was smooth. It was too much to swallow, and Rose found that she had literally built up a fine and bitter coat of spit inside her mouth. She couldn't help it. She had nothing, and her 30 seconds had been ruined. She crouched down, her sweet second skin finally off, and disappeared behind the counter. She pursed her mouth up into a kiss, and she bent her head over the mug. The long wad of spit drooled down into the cocoa, and Rose stirred it in. She was smiling now, a genuine and ugly thing, so wide it showed her back teeth. When she looked up, Tom Grandy was leaning over the counter. She froze, more naked in that moment than she had ever been. He saw her. He saw the real Rose Mae Lolly, no longer hidden by Ro, the perky waitress. His face wasn't readable. She stood up, slow, holding the mug between them like a shield, trying to call her sweet smile back. He said, "I came to get change." And his smile was plain and open. She blinked stupidly at the dollar he held out, uncertain. Maybe he had only just poked his big head up over the ledge when she looked up. "For the jukebox?" he said. "It takes dollars," Rose said, her voice gone high. "That's cool," he said, retracting the money. One yellow-skinned drunk at the counter asked for a refill, and then Tom said, "Hey, you want me to tote that cocoa back to the table for her?" He couldn't hold the plain face he was making anymore. His eyebrow quirked and his bland blue eyes changed. They filled up with just enough devil to match her. He had seen. She felt another blush coming. "I'll make her a new one," she said. She pulled the spoon out, but he was already reaching for the mug. "I'm Tom Grandy," he said. "Rose," she said. She let him take it. "Rose Mae," he read off her name tag. "All right, go ahead and get that guy's coffee. Don't worry, I'll I'll take this over. She went to pour for the drunk, peeking out from under her lashes as Tom Grandy walked back to the table with that cocoa and handed it to his date. Rose went to check on the couple in the back booth. She refilled their cups and took their order, and all the while, she watched him watching Bangs sip spit. As she came back toward Tom's booth, he pried the mug away from Bangs' fingers. All four of them were laughing and talking now, and as Rose came toward them, Tom was saying to Bangs, "Didn't you go to kindergarten? Didn't you learn to share?" And as Rose came close, he lifted up the cup, and he drank, and his eyes locked with hers over the rim. He was drinking in her spit, greedy, taking all of it. Though the cocoa was still so hot, it must be scalding him. He opened his throat, and he drank it down, and he didn't for 1 second look away from Rose. "Oh my God, you hog," his date said, laughy-teasy. "Now you have to buy me another." "What can I get y'all to eat?" Rose asked, breathless. They ordered their breakfasts, and at the end, Tom Grandy said, "And Caroline wants another cocoa, I think. Exactly like the first." He grinned at Rose, and she recognized him then. He was every boy that had ever belonged to her, from her daddy on down. Poor guy back there taping. I keep pounding the microphone. I don't know why that makes me so nervous. I do know why that makes me so nervous. Probably one of my biggest influencers are the Southern Gothic writers. They're my favorites. Flannery. And one of the hallmarks of Southern Gothic literature is you take something that is stock, a character or a situation, and then you twist it in some way. You know, you begin with a very familiar thing. For example, how many times have you seen the obnoxious customer, your hero, the waitress, does something just dreadful to their food, right? And so what you would do is you would then twist it to make a point, usually about social justice or whatever your book is about. And in this case, I was wondering if I could take that scene and make it be sex. And that's why I get so nervous. I'm reading a sex scene up here. I think that's what it is. I get all pink when I read that. Oh, he drank the cocoa. Oh. All right, anyway, if you have any questions, I would be more than delighted to answer them for you. Yeah. Where did I learn about a drop weapon? I like cops. I love cops. I have a cop thing. I watch cop shows. I read cop books. I like cops. One time in Chicago, I'm a terrible driver, and I didn't understand Chicago ever, and I got lost. I can drive in Atlanta because these streets make sense to me. They're all curvy. They go the way I go. But Chicago's like a grid. I can't. It's like you have to know math. I don't get it. So I was just tootling down this street in Chicago, and these cops pulled me over like this. There was this sedan, and they put their thing on top, and they came up, and I pulled over, and I rolled down the window, and these two plainclothes guys came up, and he goes, "Ma'am, do you have any idea why I pulled you over?" And I go, "Oh my God, are y'all detectives?" And he goes, "Yeah, where are you from?" I'm like, "I'm from Georgia." I was like, "You're in plainclothes, are you on a stakeout? Do you want my license?" And he was like, "Yeah, Georgia, this is a one-way street. Why don't you just turn around?" And they just let me go because I was so pink and pleased to be pulled over by detectives. Tragic. I was young. Anyway, yeah, I like cops, so I know about drop weapons from reading cop books and watching cop TV and seeing cop movies and thinking about cops. Yes. I did a lot in theater for a while. I was a theater major. I actually met my husband doing summer stock theater. The first time I ever saw him, he was learning to sword fight. That's better than cops. He was learning stage fighting. I worked in regional repertory theaters. I traveled around with a dinner theater that went to military bases. And we were not performing for the officers. This was like, we went to the enlisted, so it wasn't like, we weren't doing Shakespeare. I always played the girl in the low-cut blouse who was like, oops, you know. It was a broad physical comedy kind of a thing. I did a lot of voice work, which is how I got the job doing my own audiobooks. They made me audition. And that's really the only acting I do now is my own audiobooks, which I love that I get to do that. What's your favorite part? What was my favorite part I ever played? Sonia and Uncle Vanya. Yeah, she's great. What is it? She's in love with this doctor, and there's this one point that this is just terrible. But I wanted this role in a play by Sam Shepard, and so I decided, and I had done that whole play before, and I was in a class with the girl who was going to be directing the Sam Shepard play. So the teacher was like, "Can somebody read Sonia's monologue?" And I just got up and did it. And she came up after and was like, "Would you like to do a Sam Shepard play?" And the really cheesy thing about it was I remembered the whole monologue from doing Sonia, but I remember I did this thing with my wrist where she's like, I see him walking out and he never talks to me. And then there's this pause and she's like, "Why am I so plain?" And I did this thing with my wrist. Yeah, I stole that from The Little Mermaid. She does this thing when she doesn't get the guy. It's tragic. But I mean, I love acting, and when my children are grown, I'll probably do community theater again or something because it's just so much fun. But mostly my interest, even in theater back then, was playwriting. And I'm not a good playwright. It's sad because I wish I was. Yes. Oh, well, it was, okay, she wants to know why I had to audition to read my own audiobooks. Well, my publisher is Hachette, which there's a gamut of audiobooks, right? Random House, for example, is one end of the spectrum. You get a Random House audiobook, it's going to be a pretty straight read. Blah, 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 with energy and inflection, but they don't really do voices. It's like a really good reader reading aloud to you. Hachette is the other end of the spectrum. They want every character to have their own voice, you know, not caricaturish, but it changes in inflection and tone and accent, blah, blah, blah. So I didn't want to read Gods in Alabama because, well, it was my first published novel, and let's face it, the narrator is a promiscuous murderess. And everybody thinks your first novel is autobiographical. And indeed, my first novel is highly autobiographical, and it's in a drawer in my house, and you will never read it. So I didn't want to associate myself any closer with Arlene than I already was by publishing the book. So I didn't want to play her. And also, I really felt like Arlene needed to sound young. Arlene needs to sound 15 and 27, because if Arlene sounds 40, she's not forgivable. By 40, you should know better, lady. So if she sounds 15 and 27, yeah, you can empathize with a 15-year-old who does these kind of things, because you're 15. So they got an actress named Catherine Tabor to play Arlene, and she is from Atlanta, actually, so she had a real Southern accent. She sounded great, and she was perfect, and she did a fantastic job. But between, I felt like I could do. I felt like I could play Nani. Nani was in her 30s, I was in my 30s at that time, and so I called my editor, and I was like, do you think that they would let me read my own audiobook? And she said, "Oh, funny, that's so cute, no." And I said, "Really?" And she said, "No." And I said, "But I'm a good reader, and I've done theater, and I did a documentary with PBS, and blah, blah, blah." And she's like, "Okay, but no." And I said, "Well, okay, can I audition?" And she said, "You can audition, but please don't set your heart on this, because I'm telling you, Hachette really doesn't like their authors to read, and I will fight for you to get to do this, but don't set your heart." So I set my heart, and I called Darren Huang, who some of you guys might know. He is one of the guys who sort of puts the Decatur Book Festival together, and he also is the editor of Verb, which is an audio quarterly. It's a literary magazine that's in a complete audio format. Guess what he has in his basement? A studio. So Darren helped me tape my audition, and I did like a straight narration scene. I did a comedic scene to show I had timing, and then I did a fight scene with 5 men in a room beating the crap out of each other so that I could show that I could do action and voices. And I sent that to my editor, and a couple weeks later she called me. She's like, "Oh, you can do your books? That's great. They love it. It's great." So I was like, okay. And then when The Girl Who Stopped Swimming sold and I got the contract for that book, they had included a clause that said I had to read the audiobook if they I was like, yes. So I only had to audition the one time. And I've read them all. This book I'm writing right now, I don't know if I'll read because it has 2 narrators, a grandmother who's 45 and a granddaughter who's 15. If you do the math, this is not a family who has made really great choices. The mom's 30. And I might read Big, but Big is the grandmother. They call her Big Mama. She's like 5'2". She's this little frenetic lady, and her granddaughter is Mosey. I don't think I can read 15. So I was writing this book, and Mosey was getting all the good lines, and then I realized I'm probably going to be reading Big, and now Big has such good lines. Isn't that awful? It's an actor trick. So I'm having to work to balance that out and make sure everybody gets good lines. I'm like, I can't think like an actor, I got to think like a novelist. Stack the deck and give myself the best part. Yeah. I have not. My editor left us shut, and so I'm orphaned. I don't have an editor yet because Jamie Rabb is my publisher, and she said just float because they're hiring someone to take Karen's job, and she wants me to have a chance to meet her before they decide, or him, but let's be realistic. It's New York, it's publishing, it's probably her, and she's probably 12, and she probably went to Bryn Mawr, but anyway, so I'm gonna wait and meet her before they decide who will be doing in season. But I've been at that house so long, and I know everybody there that there are 2 editors I could go with right now that I feel. And Karen Karmatz-Rudy, my editor, has already read in season and given me her input, which that just makes me want to kiss her on the mouth. That's a good editor. She's like, yeah, I'm leaving. Send me the book. So, yeah. Yes. The first question is, was the first chapter always the first chapter? It was, wasn't it? Atticus? Wasn't that the chapter I read to you? Was her in the woods with the gun? Where Atticus is here from my Read Aloud writing group. And that's a really hard chapter to write. I think that the gypsy was more in the first chapter. When I first wrote it, I moved her out. But yeah, it always began with Ro getting ready to shoot Tom. I rewrote that chapter probably like 19 times because you open the scene with somebody getting ready to commit murder. You have to work a little harder to get the reader on their side. You hope she has a good reason. So yeah, it was always the first chapter, but I worked on it a lot to try and get Rose out of my head and onto the page. Secondly, yes, I have had my tarot cards read. I had them read a lot. I sat down as research for this book. I went to Berkeley, California, because I was writing stuff in Berkeley, and I had my tarot cards read, and I had my aura cleansed, which is fascinating. You sit in a chair, and a person who is very sincere, so you try to be respectful, but it is kind of weird and outside your tradition, sort of picks nits out of the air around you and then flicks them away. And mine was filthy. She was like, oh, God, it was a big job. But yeah, I've had my tarot cards read quite a bit, and I've been to see mentalists and cold readers. I wanted to get the cards right and the stuff right. So it was but that's like fun. That's fun research, going to, well, that's one of the things I learned that a lot of the times, this is not a good thing to learn necessarily. When you see those palms with the tarot card, those are hookers. Did you know that? A lot of the times, they're not actually, and you can tell right away when they come to the door if you're at the place where they're going to read your cards or if they're going to read your cards. Oh, sorry, wrong house, thank you. Never mind. I started calling ahead. Anybody else have a question? Yes. Oh, I don't love to cook. I married the right man. We catered I had a launch party for this book. We invited everybody from my church and all our friends too, and I cooked. And when I say I cooked, I mean I baked a lot of cookies, and that one cooks because he's awesome. He's awesome. He's like, oh no, I'm not awesome, but he is. And I like to cook. Like I worked in catering while I was in college. So when I married him, I could make ramen noodles with an egg in it and macaroni and cheese, or I could make homemade mushroom pate and fold it into a beef Wellington. But I couldn't make chicken, I could make like really fancy hors d'oeuvres or college food, and I had no recipe for meatloaf. So we just kind of staggered along together. I don't, but I have a favorite eat book, and it's Frank Stitt's. I like to eat stuff that people cook out of that Frank Stitt cookbook, the one that has his shrimp and grits in there. That's my favorite eat book. I don't know about a cookbook. Oh, she's asking what my writing habits are. I don't have any of those. I'm a dreadful disorganized. I don't have any habits, actually. I am so disorganized. I mean, I get them written, but my methodology is ridiculous, and I simply would not advise it for anyone who's serious about writing a novel. It's because I don't like writing. I actually really hate it. Writing stinks. Writing to me is like you go out in August in Georgia outside in a beekeeper suit, and you march to this creek where dogs have been pooping, and you dig nasty, filthy clay out of a riverbank, and it's just yucky. But then you take that stuff and you go back to your air-conditioned studio and you make something out of it. The only thing that could ever get me to write is that I know then I'll get to revise, which is my favorite thing in the whole world. I can revise endlessly, and especially when I'm getting close to having everything I've done revised, I'm going to have to actually write again. Then I get really great at revising. So what I do is I make myself violently unhappy, because it's the only way I'll write. If I put myself in a situation where I'm so miserable that writing is preferred, like I'll go and check into a Days Inn where they have a microwave and a mini fridge, and I'll stock it with lean cuisines, and I won't bring anything but pajamas and my leave-in outfit. And I'm like, you're in this Days Inn until you produce 10,000 words. And as soon as I have 10,000 words, I can go home. And then I go home, and the fun starts. Once I'm home with my 10,000 words, that 10,000 words is going to be 30,000 words. That's a third of my book. I'll get all the crap hammered out, and then then I have months of super fun where I'm happy, and you can hardly stop me from working. Eventually, I come to the end of the material. And sometimes I'm lucky. My friends, I have 2 friends who are in my writing group who get on deadline too, and we'll go to Sarah's house, and like the night we get there, her husband will make us French martinis, which is nice, and we'll sit down and we'll make our list of goals for the next day. And you get your goals, and your goals have to be approved by your 2 friends. Like your goal can't be revise 4 sentences. You know, they're like, I don't think so, Missy. You know, your goal has to be like, I'm going to get 4,000 fresh words tomorrow. Then when you wake up, everybody goes to their hole, their assigned hole in Sarah's house. And you can't leave your hole except to pee or get a drink of water or sandwich or something, you know, and you have to take that back to your hole with you until you finish your goals. Once you finish your goals, you get to leave your hole and you get to play with your best friends. And Sarah has horses and a great bar, and she's awesome, and so you don't want to be third, right? You don't want to be third. You want to be first or second done so you can go play. And so that works. Like and then I get the writing done, and then I get to the part I really like. It is it's a carrot stick. Isn't that sad? I'm like my own 2-year-old. If you clean up your room, we'll go to Cold Stone Creamery. And you have to, just like a 2-year-old, you have to mean it. Like, I don't think my husband would let me keep going on these retreats if I didn't come home with all that material. None of our husbands would. So yeah. All right, I think we probably have time for one more, and then we should probably can it. Yes. She asked if I'm doing the way my books end. No, I don't. I know the characters really well. Rose is not an exception. Rose is the rule. I've never sat down to write a book about a character I haven't thought about for a minimum of 7 years. The longest character I ever thought about was 18 years. So I started thinking about Bernice Frett when I was a fetus. That's not true. That's not true. I started thinking about Bernice Frett when I was 19 years old, and then 18 years after that, I started writing Between Georgia. And she's a minor character in that book, but that whole book came out of Bernice and the way I imagined her after seeing a street sign, you know, that I passed a bunch of times. And plot comes last. Characters come first. I have all these characters. I see a street sign. I hear a snatch of dialogue. If I'm in a restaurant near you and I look like I'm reading a book, I'm not. I'm listening to everything you're saying, and I'm probably taking notes. And I try to imagine who would say that and what the context is, and probably my context is more sordid than whatever's actually happening, because that's how my brain works. And characters will come out of that. I'll get ideas of who would have said that line, what situation are they in, and sometimes those characters will blop up. I'll realize that this girl that came out of the sign is the sister of this girl that I overheard somebody talking in a coffee house. The best line I picked up on tour, let me see if I can remember it. This woman walked past, and she was like a resort wear woman, like my age, but resort wear. Like everything had a flamingo on it, shoes, everything, and she had like invested serious hair lacquer. And she's doing that thing where you're talking on a cell phone and everybody else disappears and you just talk really loud. And I was trapped in Milwaukee, and she goes stomping by the thing, and she's yelling at the phone, and she's like, so she's on the phone promising she'll quit doing it, and she's doing it while we're on the phone. And I was like, what is it? So there's going to be a person come out of that I'll probably write about in 7 or 8 years, because I can't get rid of that line. She promised she'd quit doing it, and she's doing it while we're on the phone. I'm like, what can you do on the phone where the person doesn't know you're doing it, where you're promising you won't? And like the nicest thing I can think of is smoking, and that's not where my mind went first, I'll say that. So plot comes last. If I knew what was going to happen, I would be bored and I would never write it. And I'll start, I know the people really well, and they've all clotted up into a group. After about 7 years, I'll have a whole cast together, and I'll have 2 or 3 casts maybe, and one of them will get really loud, and I'll know that's who I'm writing about next. And so then I'll go in there and I'll set one of them on fire, and I'll see what everybody else does. And then I just go with that. And a lot of times I'm wrong, so I have to go back and revise, but I like that. Thank you guys so much for coming. I want to say one more thing. If you have friends who live over way on the other side of town, there's a young lady here, Susan Rebecca White. Stand up, you're so pretty. She is a brilliant writer. She wrote Bound South, and her new book is A Soft Place to Land, and it rocked my world. You would love it. She and I are going to be speaking together over at a bookstore in Marietta. You can get the information on either one of our websites. And if you have friends who live on that side of the city who weren't able to come here, tell them we're going to be there. She's worth hearing, and she's definitely worth reading. Thank you guys for coming.